Hey guys, tonight we explore the quiet wonders of boring science for sleep, the subtle crystallization of homemade ice cream. You're greeted by the soft hum of your freezer, the gentle click of your whisk against a chilled glass bowl, and the cool aroma of dairy settling in the air. You probably won't resist another batch. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Share where you are right now and your local time in the comments, because I love imagining this science journey all around the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pour whole milk, heavy cream, and a spoonful of fine cane sugar into the bowl, feeling the fluid swirl and coat your whisk. As you stir, the glass tingles against your fingertips. Mainstream science fact: liquids expand when warmed and contract when chilled, so that bowl will feel colder as the mix cools. You lean in, listening to the tiny clinks of sugar granules dissolving, a whispering soundtrack perfect for bedtime experimentation. With each gentle whisk, you coax air into the mixture like a lazy cloud drifting over your taste buds later. Here's a quirky tidbit: some avant-garde chefs have tried using ultrasound waves to emulsify ice cream faster, though it sounds more like Frankenstein's dessert than your nightly treat. Chemists still debate whether those ultrasonic bubbles actually improve texture or just make your kitchen sound like a sci-fi lab. As the sugar melts into the fat-rich cream, you notice the swirl's velvety sheen. You pause, tasting a sliver on your finger. It's sweet, slightly cold, and promises a smoother finish than any store-bought pint. You whisk again, thinking about how that shine comes from fat droplets coated in sugar, a natural lubricant that prevents ice crystals from clumping. Fun joke incoming if your ice cream ever looks grainy. Blame your whisking technique, not your dreams unless those are grainy too. The bowl's walls fog slightly, tiny beads of condensation forming as the mixture chills. You remember that adding sugar lowers the freezing point of water, a mainstream science fact that makes your base stay spoonable longer instead of rock hard. Without sugar, your homemade batch would rival an Antarctic glacier, minus the adorable penguins. Here's a light joke: don't expect tuxedoed birds in your freezer unless you're storing more than dessert. You pause to appreciate how simple ingredients transform into a cloud-like treat: milk proteins, fat globules, sugar crystals, and air pockets dancing in harmony. It feels almost poetic, like watching a lullaby take shape one molecule at a time. And speaking of molecules, here's another fringe tidbit: purists sometimes add a pinch of xanthan gum or gar gum to slow crystal growth, though it sounds more like salad dressing than sweet dreams. Still, you might find yourself experimenting at 3 a.m. because, hey, sleep science can be addictive. As you whisk, you feel a slow beat in the rhythm stir. Pause. Inhale the creamy scent. Stir again. Gentle sarcasm tips in: you could be watching your favorite show right now, but instead you're here, whisk in hand, living your best lab life. 3 jokes in under 200 words. Achievement unlocked. Your mixture now glistens like a moonlit pond. You scrape the sides of the bowl, gathering every last drop, making sure no sugar or cream escapes the chemistry session. Chemists still debate whether scraping ruins the temperature gradient or simply shows respect for your ingredients. Take your pick. You transfer the mix into your ice cream maker, or, if you're old school, a sealable bag nestled in ice and rock salt. Either way, you set the stage for that first crystalline whisper. Lean back. Listen to the soft churnings soon to come, and know that this simple whisking ritual has set in motion a cascade of phase changes, nucleation events, and textural wonders. In just a little while, you'll taste the fruit of your gentle labor ice cream so smooth, it's like tasting a memory. You pour a generous handful of rock salt over crushed ice in a metal bucket, watching coarse crystals tumble like miniature glaciers. As the salt seeps between the ice shards, you hear faint crackles, a soft symphony of phase change priming your ice cream adventure. Remember that fogged bowl from section 1. This chilly stage makes that condensation look like child's play. Mainstream science fact: when you mix salt with ice, you disrupt the hydrogen bonds that hold water molecules in a solid lattice, lowering the freezing point well below stas, a phenomenon known as freezing point depression. This lets your ice-salt slurry reach temperatures as low as 21 deg. 6 deg. Perfect for coaxing out smoother, smaller ice crystals in your ice cream base. Without salt, you'd get a sluggish freeze and a grainy texture, not exactly the dreamy spoonful you're after. As the salted ice begins to melt around the inner canister of your churn, you feel brisk gusts of cold air escaping the gaps, a little reminder that cold air sinks and spills out whenever you give it the chance. Here's a quirky tidbit. Artisanal ice cream makers in the Victorian era sometimes added snow instead of ice, believing it imparted a pure mountain chill, though modern scientists still debate whether that extra potent cold actually yields creamier results or just gives you frostbite in your fingertips. You dip your fingers briefly into the slushy mix just for fun, mind the metal, and immediately jerk them back. Ouch! That's below freezing territory. Gentle sarcasm surfaces if you thought your shower was cold. This salt ice bath could have you questioning life choices. 3 jokes already. You're on a roll. As the ice cream maker churns, you notice the steady whirl of paddles scraping the canister's walls, breaking nascent ice crystals and folding in air. This overrun process happens in tandem with the salt's thermal magic. The faster the churning, the more heat you extract, and the more efficient the salt-ice mixture becomes. Without proper salt ratios, usually a 1:3 weight ratio of salt to ice, you risk a sloppy freeze or a frosty rock garden. Chemists still debate whether coarse rock salt or finely ground table salt achieves optimal cooling speed, but you lean toward chunkier crystals. They look cooler, literally. A light joke flits through your mind. Your freezer at home couldn't compete with this setup, even if it had a super freeze button and a tin of Arctic snow. And speaking of snow, here's a fringe tidbit. Some experimental chefs have tried mixing seaweed extract into the salt slurry to enhance freezing efficiency. Sounds like you're making sushi in a storm. Right. But hey, weird science can lead to unexpectedly smooth scoops at 3 a.m. As the mixture spins, you glance down at the scale. Your salted ice bucket is shedding weight as the ice melts into brine, absorbing latent heat from the cream inside. Mainstream science fact: the latent heat of fusion for water is 334 J/Joule, meaning each gram of ice that melts absorbs 334 joules of energy that's plucked from your ice cream base, drawing heat out and guiding those molecules into an orderly, creamy lattice. Without that energy exchange, your cream would remain a warm milkshake, not the silky dream you're chasing. You pause and tap the side of the churn, listening to the hollow thunk as the paddles scrape against the cold canister. That rhythmic tapping is your metronome, pacing the freezing process. A light joke emerges if your life had a soundtrack. This would be a minimalist percussion track beats by stone and salt. The ice cream base inside the canister is now thickening, and you gently twist the bucket, redistributing the salty slush evenly. You catch a glimpse of condensation beads forming on the exterior, another callback to Section 1's glass bowl fog, except now it's metal sweating under molecular stress. You lean closer, reveling in that crisp, electric scent of brine and cold metal, a smell that's oddly comforting in its own Arctic way. Here's another quirky tidbit. Some molecular gastronomists use liquid nitrogen instead of salt ice slurries to freeze their blends in seconds, creating microcrystals so tiny you could call them nanoscoops. Chemists still debate whether those hyperfine textures significantly improve mouthfeel or just give you an existential chill about eating something practically flash-frozen. Another gentle sarcasm, sure. You could drop your cream into liquid nitrogen and have a TikTok-worthy smoke show. But then you'd miss out on the classic bucket and salt theatrics, the kind of hands-on alchemy that feels as homey as bedtime. As the churning slows, you turn off the motor and lift the lid. Inside, the base holds together like soft butter peach-pink streaks swirling through ivory cream. You scrape the paddles free, folding a little extra air by hand to ensure every bite feels fluffy. Mainstream science fact incorporating air up to 50% overrun by volume in commercial ice cream not only lightens texture but also acts as an insulator, slowing reheating and preserving your icy structure longer in the mouth. You spoon a small taste back into your bowl. It's cold, creamy, and velvety, with just the right amount of saltiness lingering, a subtle reminder of the ice bath alchemy. Fringe chefs sometimes add a pinch of Himalayan pink salt to the ice cream base itself, claiming that trace minerals enhance flavor complexity, though purists still debate whether it's a genuine improvement or just Instagram hype. As you clean up, you feel a deep appreciation for how salt, that humble seasoning shaker staple, transforms your humble ice cream kit into a micro-laboratory of sub-zero science. It's almost poetic, the same salt that seasons your fries now unlocks chilled dreams in your bowl. A final joke seals the moment. If life is the seasoning, then salt in ice is the universe's way of saying, here's a taste of controlled chaos. Lean back and savor that quiet sense of accomplishment before the next stage beckons, nucleation sparks waiting in the wings. You hold the churn's lid in place and watch as the pale cream inside begins to glimmer with tiny, crystalline stars, nucleation sparks heralding the transformation ahead. You lean in, breath fogging the metal rim, as the first ice embryos flicker to life at the cold interface. It's like watching dawn break over an Arctic plain, except you're armed with a whisk, not a camera crew. Mainstream science fact: nucleation occurs when supercooled liquid clusters reach a critical size, often just tens of nanometers, triggering a runaway crystallization front that spreads through the mixture. You can almost feel the molecules align themselves. Water molecules finding their hydrogen-bonded partners in a snowy waltz. The paddles churn slowly, collapsing small clusters and encouraging new ones to form all around them. Each tiny glacier is an opportunity, too many large clusters, and your ice cream turns grainy, too few, and it freezes sluggishly into a solid block. You remember the importance of that salt ice bath from Section 2, providing a steady sub-zero stage for this delicate molecular drama. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some experimental ice cream aficionados actually seed their bases with minuscule bits of crushed ice harvested from previous batches, practically a clone your crystals approach. It sounds like molecular cannibalism, but it's said to yield ultra-consistent textures batch after batch. Chemists still debate whether seeding with pre-made crystals or relying on spontaneous nucleation yields smoother texture, or just invites a panic in your playbook. As you tighten the lid, you feel a subtle vibration through the churn, a heartbeat for the solidification process. Gentle sarcasm surfaces. Who knew your ice cream maker doubles as a percussion instrument? If you ever get bored of ASMR, you could tour as the world's smallest drumline. Your senses heighten, you detect a faint, sweet aroma rising as volatile flavor compounds concentrate at the crystal liquid interface. Those tiny pockets of unfrozen syrup become micro-reservoirs of taste, ready to burst onto your tongue. It's science, but it feels like magic flavor fireworks enveloped in chilly glass. Mainstream science fact during nucleation. Latent heat is released back into the surrounding liquid, momentarily warming pockets of mixture before subsequent cooling. This thermal feedback loop can create hotspots that alter crystal growth unless you keep stirring. Without that agitation, you'd risk runaway growth and a texture rougher than last year's holiday fruitcake. You catch a muffled thump as a larger crystal breaks against the paddle, folding the mix around it. That tender crack is your cue to keep churning too slow, and you'll end up with a freezer-burnt chew too fast, and your whisk will wear out before bedtime. It's a Goldilocks problem just right. Here's the second quirky tidbit. Avant-garde chefs sometimes introduce edible nanoparticles like cellulose nanocrystals to act as nucleation centers, supposedly producing nano scoops so smooth they melt before you taste them. It sounds like sci-fi, but hey, if you wanted to feel like a dessert astronaut, this is your ride. Chemists still debate whether such additives are food safe or merely a marketing gimmick. You pause the churn briefly, tuning into the soft mechanical whir and the whiff of cold cream. If you strain to listen, you can almost hear individual molecules clinking together, though you're probably imagining that. 3 jokes in this microgravity of flavor. You're on a roll, pun absolutely intended. As nucleation progresses, you notice the mixture's viscosity climbing. It's no longer a pourable liquid, but a slowly creeping ribbon that holds its shape for a fraction of a second before folding back into itself. This soft serve stage is crucial, capturing just enough liquid to avoid iciness while locking in air and flavor. Mainstream science fact: viscosity increases exponentially as the fraction of frozen water rises. By around 30% ice content, the base transitions into a paste-like consistency, ideally suited for your spoon. You could call it the sweet spot, though everyone's version is a little different. The lid fogs over completely now, so you crack it open for inspection. Inside, a field of pale crystals glints like stardust, each one between 20 and 100 micrometers, a broad distribution that promises a subtle bristle on your tongue before yielding to creamy smoothness. You scoop a fingertip's worth and taste test. It's cold, slightly crunchy, and whisper soft. Gentle sarcasm drifts in tasting. Raw nucleation feels like speed dating molecules, quick interactions, then on to the next. Not exactly Tinder for desserts, but memorable in its own chilly way. You cradle the batch-supporting canister in one hand and restart the churn, ensuring every nascent crystal meets the paddle's steady blade. Consistent shear forces break up larger clusters, encouraging numerous smaller ones, key to that coveted silkiness. Without proper shear, your ice cream would be as coarse as beach sand. Here's a fringe tidbit. A few rogue gastronomes have experimented with magnetic fields to influence water molecule orientation during freezing, claiming it yields superfine crystals. It's still in the experimental phase. Some say it's pseudoscience. Others swear by the results. Chemists still debate whether those magnetic manipulations actually alter crystal habits or just give you an excuse to buy fancy coils. You watch the exterior of the canister frosted in a crystalline skin, the ice outside echoing the structure forming within. It's callback time. That same salt ice slurry is hard at work, wicking heat away and maintaining the relentless chill needed for nucleation to thrive. A hush falls over your kitchen, a moment of reverent pause before the symphony of growth crescendos. With a final twist of the churn's crank, you suspend the process for a quick check. The mixture holds a soft peak on your spatula, breaking like a gentle wave, a sign you're nearing end of nucleation and entering crystal growth territory. You admire the texture, a network of microscopic lattices interwoven with velvety cream. A third gentle joke slips out. If this were a relationship, you'd say you're in the goodnight cuddle phase, warmth, closeness, then a chill departure. But here, the departure is delightful ice cream for your spoon. You lock the lid and let the machine resume its quiet work, confident that those first crystals have set the stage for a luxuriously smooth finish. Lean back, listen for the soft churn, and anticipate that next tactile joy, where small nuclei blossom into a dreamlike scoop. You rest your hand lightly on the churn handle as the paddles turn, and you instantly sense how stirring speed governs the fate of every nascent crystal. You lean in, imagining those tiny ice shards colliding, fracturing, and reforming at the mercy of your chosen pace. Remember that soft peak you coaxed in Section 3. Now it's time to refine those peaks into silky valleys. Mainstream science fact: increasing shear rate during churning breaks. Large ice crystals into smaller ones, which lowers the perceived graininess and yields that signature smooth mouthfeel you crave. You notice that when the paddles spin faster, around 60 RPM, instead of 30 RPM, the base transforms into a softer ribbon, indicating a denser population of microcrystals. Without sufficient shear, you'd end up with crystals upwards of 200 enough to feel like crunchy sand between your teeth. Here's a quirky tidbit: some experimental artisans use bicycle pedal chains to drive their churns, believing that human-powered shear produces a rustic texture. It's a bit like hand-carving your ice cream. Charming, but chemists still debate whether human inconsistencies yield a better product or simply add charm to your kitchen folklore. You could almost imagine your handlebars squeaking as the paddles whirl, an eco-friendly dessert workshop. You experiment with speed. You crank up the churn, feeling the motor hum a deeper tone. The mixture's exterior frost pattern shifts, growing finer frost needles as heat is yanked out more aggressively. Gentle sarcasm bubbles up. Who knew your ice cream maker had a secret career as a wind turbine? The room feels colder, but you press on. This is the sweet science grind. As the paddles shear through the partially frozen mix, they inject air pockets and break crystals in one seamless motion. Mainstream science fact: each pass of the blade subjects the mixture to transient extensional flow, causing cavitation bubbles that further fragment crystals and entrain air. That interplay between shear and aeration is why commercial soft-serve churns operate at higher speeds, up to 100 RPM, for that fluffy and cloud-like texture. You pause briefly and strain to listen to the churn's rhythm, a rapid whir followed by the slight thump of a larger cluster being cleaved apart. Light joke incoming, this beat would make a killer loop for your next yoga playlist, Chill Step by Churn and Learn. Remember the metronome thunk from section 2. It's evolved into a full percussion track now. Your senses heighten as you scoop a tiny sample on your fingertip. It's colder, denser, and less crystalline than before, a sign your faster shear is paying off. Fringe aficionados sometimes infuse their basses with microscopic glass beads to amplify shear at a nano level, supposedly yielding ultra-micro cream. Sounds medieval torture for desserts, and chemists still debate whether those beads do anything beyond scratch your equipment. You dial the speed back down for a moment, letting the churn rest at a moderate pace. You watch streaks of thicker cream fold in, creating ribbons that shimmer under the frosted lid. You recall in section 1 how sugar influences freezing point. Now you see how viscosity and shear rate dance together. It's callback magic, low viscosity at the start, high shear now, each step building on the last. Here's your second quirky tidbit. A rebellious lab once tried sonicating their churn at high frequency during mixing, claiming it created vortex ice with swirling crystalline patterns. It looked spectacular under UV light, but chemists still debate whether those ice sculptures actually improve taste or just make your ice cream look like a disco ball. Gentle sarcasm nudges in at this point. You could market your batch as galactic ice shiny, swirly, vague enough to intrigue Instagram foodies. But you're here for science, not marketing hype, though a tweet might not hurt. As the final stages of crystal growth approach, the churn slows slightly under the weight of countless microcrystals. You've hit that inflection point where shear rate matters less. The newly forged ribbons need time to stabilize. Mainstream science fact: once the ice fraction crosses about 50%, viscosity spikes dramatically, and too much shear can actually heat the mix, reversing some of your gains. It's a delicate balance, shear enough to refine crystals, but not so much that you melt them again. You press your ear against the lid and hear only the softest hum. The mixture now holds a delicate stiffness, coating the paddles in a thick, velvety layer. You flip the dial to a whisper of motion, letting the last traces of heat bleed out gently. Call back to section 2, salt and ice slurry still labor outside, maintaining sub-zero temperatures so your internal stage remains frozen solid. You scoop another fingertip, noting the texture creamy, yet with a tantalizing whisper of frost that dissolves instantly on your tongue. It's like tasting winter dew and summer sunshine in one bite. Light joke: if you bottle this sensation, you'd have bottled poetry, winter's dream in a spoon. Finally, you disengage the motor and lift the lid. Inside lies a perfectly homogeneous mass of ice cream, no visible crystals, no clumps, just promise. You scrape a sample onto a chilled spatula, inspecting its uniformity. Fringe scientists sometimes introduce vibrating nozzles during extrusion to break nascent crystal clusters in real time. But chemists still debate whether those vibrations do more than give your equipment a thrilling jolt. You pause, equipment shut off, and take in that moment of perfect quiet. The science of crystal growth is complete: small, innumerable fragments of ice locked in a creamy matrix, ready to meet your spoon. A third gentle joke drifts: you've done more science tonight than a polar explorer. Yet you haven't even left your kitchen. Lean back. Let the stillness settle, and savor the knowledge that your stirring speed choices sculpted this very dream. You're halfway to that final scoop of bliss, and the next step beckons emulsifiers waiting in the wings to seal the deal. You settle into a gentle sway as the churn continues, and you become aware of a subtle thermal dance. The base warms fractionally, then chills again in rhythmic oscillations. It's as though your ice cream is breathing inhale heat, exhale cold, each cycle shaping the crystalline architecture within. Mainstream science fact: thermal oscillations occur because as ice crystals form, they release latent heat into the surrounding liquid, momentarily raising its temperature before the cold bath reabsorbs that energy and drives further freezing. You can almost feel those tiny heat pulses vibrating through the mix. Here's a quirky tidbit: some obsessive artisans tap the canister at regular intervals to deliberately induce thermal shocks, claiming it produces seasonally patterned crystal laminations. Think ice cream stratigraphy. Chemists still debate whether those manual taps outperform continuous stirring or are just a fancy wrist workout. You listen for the faint hiss as cold slush rushes to absorb each heat spike. It reminds you of waves lapping at a shoreline, except the shore is a frosted canister, and the waves are microsecond temperature swings. Gentle sarcasm drifts in: if only your daily mood swings were as controlled and beneficial as these thermal tides. Between oscillations, you notice the cream's surface forming tiny ridges and ripples. Light joke incoming: it's like a miniature mountain range on your midnight snack, except you don't need crampons to traverse it. As each latent heat release momentarily softens the mix, the paddles break up any enlarging crystals. Then the next cold surge refreezes them sleek and small. It's a feedback loop of perfection, choreographed by your faithful salt ice bath and the physics of phase change. Mainstream science fact: the amplitude of these oscillations can be influenced by the thermal capacity of your canister material. Stainless steel holds less heat than cast aluminum, yielding more pronounced temperature swings. You glance at your sleek steel bucket and appreciate its responsiveness. Here's another quirky tidbit: molecular gastronomers sometimes line their canisters with thin film phase change materials, wax composites that melt and solidify at targeted temperatures to stabilize oscillations. It's like equipping your ice cream maker with a built-in thermostat, though purists still debate whether it's innovation or over-engineering. Chemists still debate whether these exotic linings actually improve final texture or just add bulk to your shipping costs. You crack a joke under your breath if your kitchen had a house band. This would be its most complex time signature beats of heat and cold that only Maxwell himself could conduct. Speaking of Maxwell, do you think he ever dreamed of guiding ice cream rhythms? Probably. Between cycles, you feel the metal canister's exterior pulse in your palm warmth, then chill, then warmth again. It's a tactile ASMR moment, grounding you in the science at hand. An offbeat thought surfaces: maybe your hand is passively measuring the heat flow. Like a human thermometer, no lab equipment needed, just skin and curiosity. Gentle sarcasm: if your friends ask why your palm feels alternately toasty and frosty, just tell them you're auditioning for the role of thermal whisperer. 3 jokes already, you're on a solid roll. The thermal ebb and flow also influences viscosity. As the base warms, it loosens. As it chills, it stiffens. This dynamic viscosity modulation helps distribute air pockets and crumbs of flavor compounds more evenly, leading to a uniform mouthfeel. Mainstream science fact: viscosity is highly temperature dependent in many liquids. It halves for every 10 degrees Celsius rise. That's why even tiny heat surges can noticeably soften the mix. Here's a fringe tidbit: a small cadre of dessert scientists have experimented with programmable Peltier elements on their canisters to create custom thermal waveforms. Arguing it yields rhythmic crystallization, with unparalleled smoothness. It sounds like you're coding a dessert drone, and chemists still debate whether solid-state cooling beats traditional salt-ice slurries or just gives you an excuse to buy more electronics. You pause the churn for a second to chronicle the oscillations in your mind: faint hiss, gentle hum, click as the thermostat, aka your sense of touch, logs another cycle. Then, with a twist, you restart, letting the machine resume its meditative dance. It's callback time. Remember that latent heat discussion in Section 3? Now you're experiencing its real-time rhythm. Light joke if this were a yoga class. You'd call it chill flow, a fusion of thermal breathing and mindful stirring, huh? And admittedly, you'd attend weekly if it meant free samples. As the cycles continue, the base's color deepens slightly. The ivory cream takes on a faint, glossy sheen, signaling concentration of milk proteins and flavor compounds. You recall from Section 1 how proteins stabilize emulsions. Here, their increasing concentration at crystal interfaces enhances silkiness. You draw your spatula through the churned mix and watch a smooth ribbon trail behind. It snaps back slowly, a testament to optimal viscosity and perfect thermal pacing. Mainstream science fact: the interplay of shear, temperature, and viscosity defines the base's viscoelastic properties. Too much warmth and it becomes a runny sauce. Too much cold and it turns into rock candy. Another quirky tidbit: some ice cream hackers add edible color-changing compounds that shift hue with temperature. Imagine your mix turning rosy pink during warmer phases and porcelain white when frozen. Chemists still debate whether that novelty distracts from flavor or amps up social media appeal. Gentle sarcasm surfaces. Nothing says I'm cultured like a bowl of thermochromic ice cream, but you're here for substance over spectacle. Mostly. With a final click, you sense the oscillations tapering. The mix is nearing its final crystal size distribution and optimal rigidity. The paddles slow, and the dance transitions from oscillatory to steady-state freeze. You tighten the lid, feeling a sense of reverent calm as the thermal tides subside. One last joke: consider this your dessert's lullaby, a lullaby of heat and cold, sung in the language of latent heat and phase change. And soon, that lullaby will end in a perfect, sleepy scoop. Lean back, hear the final hush of the churn's rhythm, and anticipate Section 6's deep dive into the world of emulsifiers, where fats and water become dance partners in your sweetest dream yet. The churn hums on as you consider the unseen heroes of your homemade ice cream: emulsifiers and fat molecules. You crack the lid briefly and observe the creamy slurry clinging to the paddles, each droplet a testament to molecular teamwork. Mainstream science fact: emulsifiers like lecithin from egg yolks reduce the surface tension between fat and water, allowing your base to form a stable emulsion rather than separating into greasy puddles and icy shards. Without these tiny mediators, you'd end up with an oily layer atop a frozen sludge, much like a melted candle left in the freezer. You whisk a small sample by hand and note how much silkier it feels compared to earlier stages. Here's a quirky tidbit: some experimental chefs swear by adding a dash of mustard powder as an emulsifier alternative, claiming it brings a savory depth while stabilizing the mix, though chemists still debate whether those curcuminoids belong in dessert or your next pot of curry. As you stir, you imagine each fat globule wrapped in a shell of emulsifier molecules, like dancers in a frosty ballroom linked arm in arm. Gentle sarcasm surfaces: if only real-life relationships came with such perfect boundaries and zero clumping. 3 jokes in, you're crushing it. Fat content impacts texture too. Mainstream science fact higher fat percentages around 14 to 16% for premium ice cream create a richer mouthfeel and smoother freeze, as fat droplets interfere with ice lattice formation. Skimp on fat, and your ice cream tastes like cold chalk, an experience best avoided unless you're staging a culinary dare. You pause to taste another spoonful. It's velvety, with a subtle richness that lingers. A light joke drifts. Beware of falling in love with your own ice cream. You might start ghosting your salad. Quirky tidbit number 2. Some avant-garde dessert artists have experimented with duck fat instead of cream, praising its unique flavor and emulsifying properties. Duck fat ice cream sounds like something Dr. Doolittle's kitchen would conjure. Chemists still debate whether animal fats beyond dairy truly improve texture or just give you an excuse to Google quacktastic desserts. You run your spatula along the churn side, watching how the base peels away in smooth sheets rather than jagged chunks. The interplay of shear and emulsifier action shines here. Each pass of the blade redistributes fat droplets and water molecules, keeping everything in harmonious suspension. Gentle sarcasm. Who needs couples therapy when fat and water can get along this well? Here's a final mainstream science fact for this section. Emulsifiers also trap air bubbles more effectively, boosting overrun and contributing to that light, scoopable consistency. Without them, you'd need to churn forever just to compete with commercially whipped industrial batches. Quirky tidbit. 3 molecular gastronomers sometimes add soy lecithin, extracted from sunflower seeds, for vegan-friendly emulsions, though purists still debate whether plant-derived emulsifiers match the performance of their egg-based cousins, or if it's vegan marketing gone wild. Chemists still debate whether dietary restrictions should dictate dessert chemistry. You chuckle and adjust the churn speed slightly, appreciating how these molecular diplomats maintain order in your frosty realm. You recall Section 4's shear rate dance and Section 5's thermal tides. Now emulsifiers step in to cement all your earlier work into a cohesive, silky network. Light joke: if your ice cream base were a sitcom, emulsifiers would be the laugh track, subtle, essential, and making everything feel just right. As you near the end of this emulsification chapter, you notice the mixture's sheen deepening. The surface catches the light like a softly glowing moon. It's a visual callback to Section 1's creamy swirl, now perfected by molecular science. You lean back, satisfied by this chapter of fat and water diplomacy, and get ready for Section 7, where flavor encapsulation dynamics await. Tiny pockets of taste primed to explode on your tongue. You lift the lid and peer into the pale, churned mass, spotting tiny pockets of concentrated flavor suspended like microcosms of taste. You dip your spatula and watch as a swirl of vanilla specks and jagged fruit bits be carried along by the creamy current. Next stop, your eager tongue. Mainstream science fact: flavor compounds diffuse at rates depending on their molecular size and polarity. So small volatile molecules like vanillin travel more rapidly through the frozen matrix than bulkier sugar esters, creating time-released bursts of aroma as you scoop. You can almost track those molecules fanning out, like tiny explorers charting new sensory territory in each bite. You swirl the spatula again and taste a ribbon. The flavor hits in 2 waves. First, a whisper of sweetness, then a richer, creamier undertone as fats melt and release encapsulated pockets of flavor. It's like your mouth is a stage, and these compounds are actors entering in perfect choreographed sequence. Here's a quirky tidbit: avant-garde chefs sometimes encapsulate flavors in edible polymer spheres. Think spherified fruit, caviar that burst under pressure in the mouth, creating a pop-and-pour extravaganza inside your ice cream. It sounds more like dessert meets bubble wrap, though purists still debate whether those pearls elevate taste or just give you more cleanup. Chemists still debate whether sodium alginate spheres actually improve long-term flavor retention or simply amuse your dinner guests. You lean closer to the paddles, noting how the churn's gentle shear has spread flavor droplets evenly throughout the matrix. It's callback magic to Section 4's shear rate choreography. Those same forces that fractured ice crystals now disperse essences into every nook and cranny. Without that shear, you'd end up with flavor desserts, icy vanilla voids interrupted by syrup oases. A light joke drifts into your mind: if flavors had their own government, you'd have just engineered the most efficient postal service delivering bursts of taste on schedule. As the churn slows, you notice little trails of fruit puree clinging to the walls, cool to the touch, but still glossy with concentrated pigment. That visual cue tells you the emulsion's finished flavor droplets are properly encapsulated, ready to spring into life when warmed by your mouth. Mainstream science fact: hydrophobic flavor molecules preferentially partition into fat droplets during freezing, creating microenvironments that protect them from ice crystal damage and gradual volatilization. Without that lipid refuge, your most delicate notes would sublimate away into freezer odor rather than sweet breeze on your palate. You taste a dab, again a mellow, fruity cadence followed by a lingering creaminess that feels almost melodic. Gentle sarcasm surfaces: who knew your ice cream maker doubled as a flavor symphony conductor? 3 jokes already, you're practically a dessert comedian. Here's another fringe tidbit. Some food scientists experiment with encapsulating flavors in cyclodextrin rings, circular sugar molecules that trap volatile compounds and release them upon warming, though some argue it's more pharmaceutical than culinary. Scientists still debate whether cyclodextrin inclusion complexes yield a truer flavor or just taste like medicinal paste. You pause the churn for a moment and swirl the bowl by hand, watching those fat-laden droplets drift lazily before settling. It reminds you of sediment layers in a quiet pond, except here, each droplet is a tiny flavor vault, waiting for the molecular key your taste buds provide. Light joke: incoming tasting encapsulated flavors is like hitting the extra content on a movie bonus scenes that surprise you when you least expect them. You remember Section 6's emulsifiers, those lecithin molecules that nestled fat and water together so harmoniously. Now you see their handiwork in action without them. Flavor droplets would merge or rise to the top, leaving you with an uneven taste landscape. Instead, your base looks uniform, and each spoonful promises balanced flavor deployment. Mainstream science fact: encapsulation efficiency depends on emulsion stability and droplet size. Smaller droplets mean more surface area per volume, leading to quicker release but also requiring more emulsifier to maintain stability. It's a balancing act of molecular proportions that you've mastered tonight. Here's a quirky tidbit: some pastry rebels coat flavor droplets in nano-sized silica particles, edible, tasteless shells that delay release until the ice cream reaches a critical temperature. It's part dessert, part nanotech experiment. Chemists still debate whether ingesting food-grade silica nanoparticles is wise or simply sci-fi snack territory. Gentle sarcasm if you ever want to scare your friends. Tell them your ice cream doubles as a lab experiment. They'll never eat dessert the same way again. You twist the dial to a slow churn, allowing the last few droplets to find their ideal suspension, The hum slows to a whisper, and the surface calms into a gleaming panorama of frozen cream. You tap the side and hear a muted echo, a final callback to Section 2's salt ice percussion. The rhythm of science continues in subtle refrains. You scoop a final taste, letting the sample rest on your tongue. First, the sweetness of pure cream, then a crescendo of fruit and vanilla. Finally, a soft afterglow as the fats melt and coat your palate. It's like a 3-act play condensed into one blissful forkful. Light joke, if this were a theatrical production, you'd have just premiered the world's shortest yet most satisfying flavor opera. In this moment, you appreciate the invisible work of diffusion, partitioning, and encapsulation, all orchestrated by the interplay of temperature, shear, and emulsifiers. It's Callback Symphony Section 1's Whisking Prelude, Section 2's Salt Ice Overture, Section 3's Nucleation Interlude, Section 4's Shear Crescendo, Section 5's Thermal Intermezzo, Section 6's Emulsifier Finale, and now Section 7's Flavor Fugue. Gentle sarcasm tip, admit it. You're more jazzed about ice cream chemistry than most people are about their morning coffee. As the last chimes of the churn fade, you prepare for Section 8, the airy world of overrun, where pockets of gently entrained air turn your frozen melody into a fluffy dream. Sit back, listen for your kitchen's soft exhale, and get ready for the next act in our chilled journey. You pause the churn and peer through the frosted lid, noticing tiny bubbles rising like slow-motion soap suds before vanishing into the creamy abyss. You realize that these air pockets, this overrun, are what transforms dense frozen custard into the light, dreamy treat you can scoop by the moonlight and still feel weightless. Mainstream science fact overrun. The increase in volume from air incorporation can range from 20% in premium gelato to as much as 100% in commercial soft serve, and it significantly affects texture and melt rate by introducing insulating pockets that slow heat transfer. Without enough air, your ice cream would feel like a dense brick, delicious. Sure, but about as comforting as holding a cinder block in your lap. Chemists still debate whether dialing overrun closer to 80% yields the perfect balance of creaminess and lightness, or just turns your scoop into frothy marshmallow soup. You crack open the lid and watch as the paddles fold air in with each revolution, dragging bubbly ribbons through the base. It's like breathing life into your dessert. Inhale cold cream. Exhale tiny clouds of aerated delight. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some culinary daredevils chase overrun percentages upward of 150% by using whipped egg whites or methyl cellulose to stabilize massive air volumes, though fringe scientists still debate whether those foaming agents belong in a dessert or a molecular gastronomy symposium. If you ever taste aerated duck fat ice cream, you'll know exactly where the boundaries are. Gentle sarcasm drifts in. If your life had more overrun, you'd be twice as light on your feet. Just don't try scooping yourself into outer space. 3 jokes already. You're lighter than air. You lean closer and tap the side of the canister. That soft thump-thump is the rhythm of air pockets collapsing and reforming. A metronome for texture. Remember the percussion track from Section 2, this is its airy cousin, beats by overrun and stir. As the churn pulls in more air, you notice how the mixture's viscosity changes. It thickens slightly, then loosens as bubbles expand. Mainstream science fact. The rheology of ice cream is non-Newtonian. meaning its viscosity varies with shear rate so as you churn faster to fold in air. The base thins just enough to accept more bubbles before stiffening again to trap them in place. Without that shear thinning behavior, your mixture would resist aeration like your cat resists bath zone. Here's another quirky tidbit. A niche group of dessert engineers have experimented with injecting pure nitrogen gas into their ice cream bases under pressure, claiming it creates superfine bubbles that resist collapse, similar to nitro coffee. Purists still debate whether that yields a smoother texture or just gives you an excuse to buy scuba gear kits. Chemists still debate whether nitrogen bubbles hold flavor any better than plain old whisked air. You grab a spoon and taste a small dollop. It's buoyant, almost like cotton candy masquerading as frozen cream. But with the satisfying density, you need to feel like you're actually eating something. Light joke flits by. Beware, this over-aerated cloud might float off your spoon if you stare too long. Leaning in, you consider how temperature and overrun interact. If your mix is too cold before aeration begins, bubbles struggle to expand, leaving you with dense, closed-cell foam. If it's too warm, bubbles grow too large and collapse before freezing, creating unsightly air pockets that vanish into nothingness. Chemists still debate whether the optimal aeration temperature lies around 5 degrees Celsius or closer to 10 degrees Celsius. But your kitchen protocol has you flirting right in that sweet spot. Gentle sarcasm if you ever need career advice. Just remember, you've mastered the art of temperature-appropriate aeration. 3 cheers for temperature math. Not exactly an Olympic sport, but definitely a dinner party conversation starter. You adjust the churn speed in tiny increments, watching as bubble size distribution shifts. Fine foam yields a smoother mouthfeel. Coarse foam yields a denser bite. Mainstream science fact: bubble diameters in high-quality ice cream typically range from 50 to 200 micrometers, small enough to slip past your tongue's pressure sensors without triggering a sand-in-the-gearbox sensation. Without that microfoam precision, you'd feel each bubble like a surprise gristle. Here's a fringe tidbit. Molecular gastronomers sometimes add small amounts of xanthan gum or carboxymethylcellulose to stabilize foam and prevent bubble coalescence. It sounds like you're thickening your dessert with industrial lubricants, and some say it's overkill. Chemists still debate whether hydrocolloid stabilized foam actually enhances long-term overrun stability or simply makes the cleaning process more challenging. You smile at the notion of cleaning because more air means less mixture contacting the paddles, and therefore an easier cleanup, right? Gentle sarcasm, sure, until you realize foam splatters stick everywhere like whipped cream on a toddler after snack time. Tasting another spoonful, you note how the air pockets cushion the ice crystals, softening their impact on your tongue. It's like a lullaby for chilly shards. Mainstream science fact: air acts as both an insulator and a buffer, reducing thermal conductivity by up to 30% and slowing melt-off, giving you extra seconds of creamy pleasure before the meltdown begins. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ice cream savants use a 2-stage aeration process: first coarse bubbles at low shear, then fine bubbles at high shear, to create a bimodal distribution that balances ease of scooping with melt resilience. It's like a double espresso shot for your dessert, though chemists still debate whether that complexity is worth the extra mixer time. You crack a light joke: if only your brain could overrun information the way your ice cream does, introduce fun ideas and feelings, then trap them in place for later enjoyment. You lean back, savoring the sensation of that last aerated bite, It dissolves into warmth, leaving behind a cushion of flavors and memories. You recall Section 7's flavor fugue and Section 6's emulsifier diplomacy. They all converge here in a frothy crescendo of taste and texture. Gentle sarcasm drifts by congratulations. You've now corralled water, fat, sugar, and air into a perfectly engineered cloud. If only making actual clouds were this easy. As the churn winds down, you disengage the paddles and lift the lid one final time. Inside lies a tender, foamy swirl, light enough to float, substantial enough to satisfy. You scrape a sample onto your spatula, admiring the uniform bubble network like a miniature aerated metropolis. Lean back and listen for the final whisper of the churn. You've mastered overrun and aeration, two invisible ingredients that make this treat feel like midnight magic. Next up, Section 9's aging and ripening effect, where patience deepens flavor and refines texture even further. You lift the churn's lid one last time, revealing a mass of softly agitated cream studded with airy microbubbles and gleaming pockets of frozen delight. Instead of diving straight in, you gently scrape the mixture into a chilled container, then tuck it away in your freezer for the aging and ripening effect. It's like sending your ice cream to a spa retreat. Patience is the secret ingredient now. Mainstream science fact during aging. Proteins and hydrocolloids hydrate fully, and fat crystals recrystallize, creating a more stable emulsion and improved whipping capacity. This rest period, typically 4 to 24 hours at around 4 degrees C, helps develop creamier texture and a richer mouthfeel. Without aging, your ice cream base can be unstable, yielding coarse crystals and flat flavor. You close the freezer door and settle in with a soft blanket, imagining those molecules settling into place. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some obsessive home chefs swear by agitating their containers every 30 minutes during aging to prevent large crystal formation, akin to checking your plant cuttings hourly, only frostier. Chemists still debate whether intermittent agitation truly beats a gentle, uninterrupted chill. As time passes, you notice an almost imperceptible crust forming on the container's edge, tiny ice carvings whispering of moisture migration. Gentle sarcasm surfaces. It's like your ice cream is developing a flip phone-era frosty beard nostalgia, never tasted so chilly. 3 jokes. Check. In the freezer's calm dark, diffusion processes continue. Unfrozen water migrates toward ice crystals, slowly equalizing water concentration and smoothing out any irregularities. Mainstream science fact. This process, called recrystallization, reduces crystal size variance. Small crystals coalesce into fewer, larger ones if the temperature fluctuates, so maintaining consistent freeze at 18 degrees or below is crucial to prevent graininess. You peer through the frost-speckled door glow and recall Section 5's thermal oscillations here. The freezer's own minor temperature cycles can have similar effects, albeit on a slower timescale. Chemists still debate whether freezers with digital precision or manual ice wedge freezing produce optimal recrystallization outcomes. It's a home lab mystery. Quirky tidbit number 2. Artisanal makers sometimes age their bases in wine barrels, claiming that oak tannins impart subtle notes of vanilla and spice during rest. It sounds like a cross between a dessert and a vineyard tour, though purists still debate whether barrel aging elevates ice cream or just confuses your taste buds. You imagine opening that barrel churn at dawn, the scent of oak and cream mingling in the air, an adult's pastry dream. Gentle sarcasm. If only you could barrel age your morning coffee. You'd have a hipster cafe in your kitchen. Let's check in on flavor maturation during aging. Flavor compounds bind more intimately with fat droplets and proteins, mellowing harsh ethanol notes from extracts and deepening vanilla's floral undertones. Mainstream science fact: hydrophobic interactions strengthen over time, locking flavor molecules into the emulsion's lipid phase. This yields a smoother release profile when you finally scoop. Without aging, some flavors can taste sharp or one-dimensional. You close your eyes and inhale the faint aroma escaping from the freezer seal like a promise of tomorrow's reward. Here's a fringe tidbit: some molecular gastronomers inject controlled doses of oxygen scavengers into their containers to prevent oxidative flavor loss during storage. Though chemists still debate whether these techniques are food safe or just overkill for your midnight snack. A light joke drifts: if your fridge had a social media account, it'd post #ChillGoals every morning. 3 jokes already, you're on a roll. As hours pass, ice structures stabilize and fat crystals polymorph into more stable forms, which impacts scoopability. Mainstream science fact: the Vija fat crystal form gives optimal creaminess, whereas the less stable Vij form can lead to icy or greasy textures. Proper aging encourages Vija formation through slow, low-temperature holds. Without this polymorphic transition, your ice cream risks a greasy mouthfeel rather than melting smoothly. You imagine those tiny fat crystals realigning under the freezer's steady vigil, like dancers rehearsing for the grand performance. Gentle sarcasm: if your weekend self were this disciplined, you'd conquer the world instead of binge-watching cat videos. Between aging and recrystallization, moisture migration can cause concentration of solutes at the surface, visible as a thin ice bloom. You plan to shield your container with plastic wrap pressed directly onto the cream's surface to minimize this. Mainstream science fact: minimizing headspace and oxygen exposure reduces freezer burn and ice crystal growth on the surface. It's simple but often neglected, like remembering to floss after dessert. Here's another quirky tidbit: some chefs top the surface with a thin layer of alcohol-infused sugar syrup before freezing, creating an alcohol seal that hinders water vapor loss. Chemists still debate whether drinking in means dessert stays soft or if you just end up with boozy tooth decay. Gentle sarcasm: a drizzle of rum might improve both flavor and your karaoke confidence. Finally, you decide the next morning has arrived. You open the freezer, scrape away any bloom, and take your first scoop. The texture is ethereal, silky ribbons that hold shape but yield instantly, a testament to the power of patient aging and precise temperature control. Flavor notes are elevated. Mouthfeel is velvety, and each bite dissolves like a dream. Light joke: if this ice cream could talk, it'd whisper, "Thanks for the spa day." You savor that first heavenly bite, appreciating how time and temperature conspired in your frozen retreat. It's a callback crescendo every previous section's science salt chemistry: nucleation, shear, thermal tides, emulsifiers, flavor encapsulation. Overrun coalesces here into one sublime moment. Lean back, close your eyes, and let that spoonful fade into memory. Tomorrow, you'll repeat the ritual, but for now, relish this cooling triumph. You lift the chilled container from the freezer and peel back the lid. Greeted by a pristine surface of ivory cream, shot through with tiny air pockets and glinting crystals, the culmination of every careful step you've taken tonight. You scoop up a generous spoonful, feeling its weight give slightly before the ice cream yields into a smooth cascade over the bowl's rim. Mainstream science fact at this final stage: ice content in premium ice cream typically sits around 50 to 60%, with the remaining balance of fat, sugar, air, and dissolved solutes contributing to optimal texture and mouthfeel. You're holding the textbook ideal right in your hand, a freeze frame of molecular mastery. You bring the spoon to your lips and taste that very first bite. The creaminess envelops your tongue. The tiny air pockets cushion each icy shard, and flavor bursts ripple gently as fats melt and release encapsulated vanillin and fruit essences. It's like a slow-motion fireworks display of taste, soft, unhurried, and utterly dreamy. Here's a quirky tidbit: some adventurous chefs drizzle their finished churn with a mist of liquid nitrogen vapor for dramatic effect, claiming it leaves an ultra-fine frost collar on the surface. But chemists still debate whether that chilly halo actually enhances taste or simply gives you frostbite on your eyebrows. As you savor that melting bliss, you feel the echoes of our journey together. The rhythmic whisking from Section 1, the salt ice crackles of Section 2, the nucleation sparkles from Section 3, the shear rate choreography of Section 4, the thermal breaths of Section 5, the emulsifier diplomacy in Section 6, the flavor fugue of Section 7, the airy crescendo of Section 8, and the patient aging in Section 9. It's callback symphony in your spoon, a dessert concerto performed molecule by molecule. Mainstream science fact: sensory perception of creaminess is closely linked to fat droplet size and distribution. Smaller droplets create a more uniform coating on taste buds, delivering that signature velvety sensation. Yours are perfect, thanks to meticulous emulsifier work and precise shear control. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the flavors unfold, a gentle wave of sweetness, a nuanced backbeat of dairy richness, and a soft finish that fades like a distant lullaby. Here's a light joke: if your taste buds had a vacation home, this would be its ultimate staycation, no packing required. You pause to reflect on that fringe tidbit from Section 7, the cyclodextrin spheres that some scientists embed for time-release flavor pops. You wonder if your home kit could handle that nano caviar extravaganza, though purists still debate whether it's culinary magic or pharmaceutical cosplay. Gentle sarcasm surfaces: you've traveled from plain sugar water to dessert nirvana without leaving your kitchen bench. 3 jokes in your final act. You've outdone yourself. Taking another spoonful, you notice how the air pockets buffer each icy fragment, making every bite feel weightless yet substantial. Mainstream science fact: overrun levels influence thermal conductivity, so your perfectly measured 40% air will melt just slowly enough to keep you in a gentle trance, rather than sliding off your spoon in a single gulp. A third quirky tidbit: molecular gastronomers sometimes apply gentle ultrasonic waves during the final freeze to align fat crystals in parallel arrays for extra gloss. But chemists still debate whether those VIP crystals really look any shinier under disco lights, or if it's just a lab trick. You cradle the bowl in one hand, spoon in the other, and let the flavors linger. Subtle callbacks whisper in your mind. Section 5's thermal oscillations that coaxed those complex lattices. Section 9's aging that deepened every note. Section 2's salt chemistry that laid the groundwork. Everything converges here in this perfect spoonful. Gentle sarcasm: if life had a reset button, you'd reach for ice cream instead of rebooting your router. At least dessert never crashes. With a final smile, you finish the last tender bite. It dissolves into a soft memory, leaving behind warmth and contentment. You place the empty bowl aside and breathe deeply, cherishing that tranquil post-dessert glow. You linger in the stillness, senses softly attuned to the gentle backdrop of your kitchen's hum, now quiet after the churn's retreat. The cool air brushes against your skin like a whispered promise, reminding you that even the most intricate science has a serene conclusion. In these moments, you recognize the beauty of patience, of subtle rhythms, and of molecular dances invisible to the eye but tangible in every spoonful. Let your mind trace the path you've traveled tonight, from the first tentative whisk to the final creamy embrace, each phase a deliberate step toward sweetness and calm. Breathe slowly, allowing tension to release with each exhale, as if you're letting go of ice crystals dissolving on your tongue. Feel the soft cadence of your heartbeat, matching the gentle ebb and flow of thermal tides you orchestrated so carefully. There are no more decisions to make. No temperature tweaks or paddle turns, only the tranquil knowledge that science can soothe as effectively as any lullaby. You may find your thoughts drifting to other rhythms, but for now, focus on the quiet satisfaction that comes from mastery and discovery. As you rise to retreat from your cozy corner, carry this stillness with you. Let the memory of that silky texture and whisper-soft flavor guide you toward rest. Perhaps you'll revisit this ritual another night, whisk in hand, ready to choreograph another molecular symphony. But until then, allow yourself to float on the gentle afterglow of crystalline dreams. Softly now, drift away on the promise of tomorrow's scoop, confident that even the most delicate ice crystals can leave an indelible mark on your heart.